Morning, everyone. So, budget's tomorrow, and obviously the media frenzy on it is quite impressive. We've mostly had, what would you call it now? You'd mostly have it focused on the tax side of it, because, of course, that's what most of the media concern themselves with, because we know that they basically bat for, well, the lowest social class, you would say, is the upper middle classes, right? But and this was a focus. I was looking at this BBC article today, and this actually is probably one of the most balanced ones of the pieces I've been reading. And yet, even that, let me just show you what. Well, I can't show you because we know it all goes blurry, so I'll just have to refer to it. So there's a BBC article, and it's going over test cases of various people, right? And it starts off, fair enough, with people who are struggling. It starts off with a lady at 38 who's clearly gone into higher education. She's a student, she gets a student loan. So her overall income is about £21,500 a year. And she's single with two children. And rent, it's quite good. It goes through what the rent is, £600 per month, which is, again, is around here. Obviously, in some parts of the country, it'd be more than that. And you go, okay, fair. You can understand how someone like that will struggle. But then you would also look at it and you think, so her focus here is on if the cost of fuel goes up, which is fair enough. I mean, I actually said myself some time ago that in terms of this not putting up taxes on working people, I thought to myself, well, given that fuel duty is set to go up, that is a tax on working people. So that if anyone's going to leverage anything against Labour on this, I would say fuel duty is the obvious one, even though it was already set to go up anyway. But we will see what happens with that. But, you go down this thing and then you come to the third one down and it's absolutely brilliant. And it's, again, it's a single lady with children, two children. And you think, okay, she earns £150,000 a year. Okay, 150, and I'm thinking, right, hang on. The median income is £35,000 a year. If you're earning £150,000 a year, actually, I should have looked up beforehand in what top percentage you are, right? But you're one of the, and I know there are people who get paid millions, right? Which is a different one. But if you're on £150,000 a year, you are still in the top few percent. It is the top percent you will be is in the single figures. And, and it says, I have to spend £2,600 per month on childcare. And you think, well, actually, I mean, that's a good point. The fact that, because she could afford that, because there's no indication in here at all that she will have to cut back on anything. In fact, her main gripe is the capital gains tax. And I'm sorry, if you're going to complain that capital gains tax is going up, you're rich. It's really that simple. If you are, no one who's not rich has to pay capital gains tax. And if you do, remember, when you pay capital gains tax, you are always paying a rate equal or lower to income tax. So the fact that you get to class it as capital gains means you're getting a tax break effectively. I thought to myself, look, so the only decent point that's been made there is the fact that it is possible to have £2,600 a month childcare costs for two children, which is fairly standard. But why didn't they, he said, didn't find someone who's actually struggling, find someone who can't afford that with the job they would have, which means that they can't take that job, because that's a serious issue. The fact that, there are some people who will get, I can get this job, brilliant. I can't afford £2,600 a month childcare on this wage. Why aren't we focusing on that? Scott Walton, 999 Super Chat, thank you very much. Says 150,000 a year is well into the top 2%, close to 1%. She's very rich. Yeah, exactly. And it's, it's got the mortgage costs here. In fact, I'm going to look, right, let's do it properly. I'm just going to assume. Hang on. No, it's fine. You've made me forget what I'm doing now. Right. So I've plugged that in. I've not assumed any. She might have pension contributions. I don't know all the stuff. She won't effectively get child benefit because she's earning far too much. She will, but then she'll have to pay it back. So this works out at roughly a net wage after taxes, after income tax, after national insurance of £7,600 a month. So, okay, Graham reckons I can stick this up. So let's give it a go. So if I just put this here, £7,600 a month after taxes. Oh, no, I'll put it in front of me. You don't need to see me. And so £1,800 per calendar month mortgage, 2,600 there. So that's like 4,400. She's still got about £3,300 a month left for bills. Like, some people do not get £3,300 a month total. A lot of people, in fact, if you're on the average wage, you don't get anywhere close to that total. So, I mean, this is someone who should not be. If you're looking at people who could be worried about, because that's what the focus is. The focus of this article is not winners from the budget; it's losers. It's people who are worried about the budget. You do not stick someone like that on it. You do not stick. And it even says in there that the children's father helps with costs. So even that £2,600 per month on childcare is not the total amount she's paying. It's and it absolutely mind-blowing, because some of the people on here, you think, yeah, these are some of the people featured on it are people, it's like, yeah, they're only just managing and they're not managing well. The one below that is a part-time cleaner, and she has PIP as well, and that's, you know, obviously going to be a concern. I just think, what on earth are they doing? I mean, another thing, Patrick there saying £30,000 per year on childcare is huge. Well, yes, but nonetheless, you know, childcare is still unaffordable for some people. There are some people who cannot afford to take up certain jobs specifically because the salary would not cover the cost of childcare. And, you know, you just think how much easier if the government wants, I know it's not going to be cheap to do, but if the government wants to reduce barriers to the workplace, one of the first things you would do, is you would make sure that we had childcare. Surely what we should be looking at is we have schools already. So why don't we just expand schools to include, to sort of make them also childcare centres? So have parts of them that are childcare centres. And that would be much cheaper than having a separate private childcare provider. Have state childcare from as soon as you would need it, from like 1 year old or whatever, up to whenever you need it. Because, I mean, one thing I always find mad is that schools finish too early. They finish at like 2:30 these days. And you just think about, for working, like, why don't we extend schools, like expand schools as childcare centres so that they can actually, even, you know, school age kids, so there's like extracurricular stuff that they can do afterwards. If it's, you know, that way they can stay there till like maybe 6 o'clock and you can pick them up after work, no problem. You know, remove children. It's like, and we have this double problem at the moment because we know now, like, fertility rates are lower than they've ever been. So you're going to have record few births, and they'll go, well, we have this mad situation where it's like, right, we want to try and restrict immigration at the same time as our birth rate is going down. And you think, so what are the barriers here? We know is that if you have children, it means if you've got there are lots of careers you just can't do, or you can't easily do. But anyway, madness. Sean there saying she could move to Burnley, you can still buy a house for £14,000. Yeah, well, I often say this, but things like that, just in general. I mean, some of these people, by the way, are just from the Midlands. They're not from the south of England. They have been reasonably fair in that they haven't picked on people in the most expensive parts of the country. Although those people, and I do often say, when people are sort of saying, oh, I'm on £50,000 a year, but I can't make ends meet. And I just think, And I'd try and take account of the extra cost of housing in the south. But I have lived my whole life in the sort of the boundary between the North Midlands and the north of England, that sort of Humber type of area. And, you know, on the minimum wage, if you're full time, that is, if you're full time on the minimum wage, you can actually afford the cost of living. Now, okay, granted, if you were supporting a whole family just on that, no, you can't. But for yourself, or if you had two people working on the minimum wage and you were both full time, you can actually easily meet the cost of living. I'll say easily. I mean, you're not going to be flush. Don't get me wrong. But you can even get more. I mean, I've known people on the minimum wage who've got a mortgage. You can do it. So you just sometimes think, why don't you just move up north? We're more civilized. You have proper fish and chips. We serve it with mushy peas. It's brilliant. Sometimes curry sauce if you fancy it. And because that's weird to me. In the south of England, fish and chip shops, it's like you have for fish and chips. Great. What can I have with it? What? Nothing. You can have salt and vinegar. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. So you get better fish and chips, and it's cheaper. But the downside is not as many jobs. So it's not as easy to get the jobs, and the jobs don't necessarily pay as much. Like that person on £150,000 a year, job tech consultant. Does it say where she is? Because I'm not trying to pick on her, by the way, but Kent. Like she won't get that job up here, and if she did, it won't be on that money. So you know, it's. But there we go. Don't forget the gravy. See, I'm not one for gravy myself, unless it's like sometimes I make at home sausages in gravy and do that with my own homemade chips. But I wouldn't get it from the chip shop. I'd get curry sauce usually, or sometimes mushy peas. I wouldn't get both. But anyway, never mind. Where were the news media when the poor were getting shafted in every direction over the last 14 years? Well, exactly. I mean, another thing, the Daily Telegraph are moaning today about the minimum wage. Oh, the minimum wage is going up. Yeah, it always goes up. It's going up above the level of inflation. Yeah, it does. Even under the Tories, the minimum wage went up above the level of inflation because it absolutely has to. But they're complaining because it's going to go up by even more now because Labour said that they're going to. So basically, the minimum wage is based on recommendations. The Low Pay Commission, they work out what the minimum wage should go up by, and the government will always say, "Oh, it's an independent body. It's an independent body." It's like, yeah, it is, but it's following your guidelines. That was always my point. Whenever the Tories would say, you know, they would talk about public sector pay awards or minimum wage or even state pension, it would always be, oh, but you know, we're taking on the recommendations of this independent body, and they didn't always do that, by the way. They didn't always do that, but generally speaking, they have. But it's like, but they write the guidelines. Well, the guidelines have changed now because we've got a new government, and the guidelines for minimum wage, or living wage as it's called now, has to take into account the actual cost of living. And the way it does that is it's now got, and this is why the Telegraph today, in fact, I've just been doing a video on it, it says, Reeves to hand workers pay rises of more than triple rate of inflation. Chancellor expected to increase minimum wage from £11.44 to £12.10. And you think to yourself, how do they know? Because she hasn't announced anything. She's not announcing it till tomorrow. So how do they know that Rachel Reeves is going to announce that the minimum wage is going to go up to £12.10? The answer is because she's changed the guidelines so that the Low Pay Commission have to make sure that the minimum wage is going to be 2/3 of the median hourly rate for workers. So whatever the median pay is, the minimum wage is going to be pegged to 2/3, because that's sort of like the definition of poverty, isn't it? If you're below 2/3 of the minimum wage, of the median income, then you're sort of in poverty. So they're basically saying we're going to keep them above that level by pegging it to 2/3. Whereas what the Tories used to do, their guidelines were effectively based on how can we avoid an armed revolution? Not that it would be armed, because we don't really have weapons in this country. We have cricket bats, maybe. But that was basically what it was. The Tories wanted to screw people over as much as they could, but they also recognise that there's a critical mass of people. If you get above a certain number of people who cannot cope with the cost of living, then that's curtains for you. You're absolute curtains, you're knackered. So it's all about just keeping a lid on it. Whereas now it's basically saying, sorry, there might be some noise. I've just heard some machinery going. So now what they're saying is, no, it's going to have to be pegged at 2/3 of that, which also means that people are still talking about fish and chip shops. This is my fault. I'm sorry. But that also means that as the other moves come in place to raise overall pay, not just talking about people on minimum wage now, but all pay, all workers, as their wages go up, because obviously boosting public sector pay above the level of inflation doesn't just improve. I mean, that is obviously going to increase the median income in itself, because we've got a lot of public sector workers in the country. But it puts pressure on the private sector, because, as Rachel Reeves has said, the whole point of paying more for public sector workers, it's not just to keep those public sector workers happy, it's to attract more, because we've got staff shortages in the public sector. So, and where are we attracting those workers from? Well, the private. If they're not working in the public sector already, we're attracting from the private sector. So that puts pressure on the private sector to make their pay awards more generous as well. So your overall median income will go up due to various other measures. And because now minimum wage is going to be pegged to 2/3 of the median, then that will naturally drag that up more than would have been under the Tories as well. Optimistic nihilist there, £10 super chat. Thank you very much. Says, Labour have lost control of the narrative. Yeah, unfortunately. Even progressive family friends and colleagues at work think they're going to be screwed on their taxes, while super rich get more tax breaks and deregulation. Yeah, it is disappointing, because the absolute opposite is the case. The absolute opposite. There was an economist yesterday explaining how, all of these tax rises are on the wealthy. They're on the better off. The only one, as I say, the only serious difference there, or the only one I would think is where they can be targeted, is fuel duty. Ironically, the best way to deal with that would be an actual pay per mile, which they sort of had to rule out during the election, because the Tories were going on about it. But that would be the best one. But yeah, the fuel duty is the main stick to beat them with. But yeah, they've completely lost the narrative. It's utterly ridiculous. I mean, the tax rises that are going up, employers' national insurance, capital gains tax. We think there are going to be some changes with inheritance tax. We don't really know. None of these things have been confirmed. Although when Labour sort of start to say, no, we didn't rule that out, and we didn't rule that out, you start to suspect as well. But all of these things, and all obviously the ones they'd already announced anyway, VAT on private schools. There was a report recently saying that no private schools had closed down since these changes were announced as well. So that's all nonsense too. But there we go. Vendetta saying there's nothing attractive about £12.10 per hour. There is when it was previously £11.44. And like I say, it depends where you are. Round where I am, you can manage on that. You can manage on that. But you say fuel's going to affect everyone. Yeah, it does. But obviously, because fuel duty is effectively a sales tax, really. And any form of sales tax, because it's literally a percentage tax on something you're purchasing. So any form of sales tax, particularly for an essential, and if you need fuel, you need fuel, right? We're not talking about people who are rally drivers in their spare time. We're talking about people who need to get to work. So, and obviously, increasing fuel duty also affects the cost of transport. So that also can put up the cost of goods indirectly. So anything like that is going to hit people on lower incomes disproportionately, because if you've got someone who needs to spend £200 a month on fuel to get to work, right? You don't pay more because you're on a better income. Like if you've got two people who are neighbours and they go to the same place of work that's however many miles away, right? And they both spend £200 a month on fuel specifically to get to work, not counting their other fuel costs, just specifically to get to work and back. And one of them works for minimum wage as a cleaner at that place of work, and the other one works as a manager on like 70, 80,000 pounds a year. It's the same cost for both of them, but it hits the poorer worker more. So fuel duty is an awkward one in terms of this, I would say, this promise to not raise taxes on working people. And it's actually bizarre to me that I'm not really seeing the right-wing media or any media really pushing that. I've seen them moaning about capital gains tax, and this comes back to the media thing. I've seen them moaning about capital gains tax. I've seen them moaning about employers' national insurance contributions. I've seen them complaining about inheritance tax, which we don't even know what's planned yet, right? I've not really seen them moaning about fuel duty. And I'm thinking to myself, and the reason for that, I reckon, my speculation, is because these people, some of them pay capital gains tax. Some of them, their kids will pay inheritance tax because they're wealthy, right? Some of them are employers, or they know employers, so their friends are employers. So they moan about the national insurance. They're not people who worry about the cost of fuel. Many of them may not have a car. If you live in the middle of London, you probably don't have a car. You don't need one. Or just in the middle of a city in general. So maybe the reason why they're not moaning, even though that's the most obvious one to push Labour on, because even Labour's definition of working people, they use fuel, and you're now making that more expensive. Pygmalion there, £5 super chat, thank you. It says, how would paper mile, I think you've enforced and charged? It would take a huge investment in infrastructure enforcement. It wouldn't take a huge investment. It would take an investment. Because like you say, it's only like you, Les. That's why during the London mayoral contest, they were trying to say that Sadiq Khan was going to bring in paper mile, because all of the same infrastructure you need for you, Les, works for paper mile. That's all you would need. If they can do it in London, they can do it anywhere else. So you would need investment, sure. But the reason why we're probably going to have to move to paper mile is because, remember, we're moving to a point where we're going to, at some point in the foreseeable future, ban the sale of combustion engine cars. So petrol and diesel cars. They're going to be banned from, new cars are going to be banned from sale quite soon. So we're moving to electric cars, right? So every year, because people already have electric cars, and every year more people get electric cars. So the number of people paying fuel duty is going down every year, to the point where you cannot, fuel duty is not a long-term tax anymore. Fuel duty is going to be meaningless in a few years' time. In 5 to 10 years' time, it's going to have to be replaced with something. It has to be replaced with, you can't just keep whacking up fuel duty for those who because let's face it, who are going to be the last people to get electric car? People on lower incomes, right? So it's going to be really regressive. Fuel duty, you could argue, is a little bit already, but it's going to be very regressive just in a few years. So we have to replace it with something. Paper mile is the obvious one, because then that means if you don't, it also encourages people to not make unnecessary journeys. You could argue the fact that if you make an unnecessary journey, you're using more fuel, so you're paying more anyway. But people don't really think about that. Whereas if they know they're paying for every journey, directly for every journey, it might make people less inclined to make journeys that they don't need to. But also, you can, you can then adjust it as necessary. But fuel duty, yeah. Sean, they're saying we have tachographs for trucks. Yeah, I don't think we'd necessarily do that. I think it will just be cameras, is how it would work. Moving to autonomous electric vehicles, yeah, not just yet. In the future, sure, yeah, absolutely, but not just yet. I think that's still a way off. Although, I don't know. Technology sometimes powers up really quickly. Joanna, they're saying, my only problem with EVs, total lack of infrastructure. Absolutely, yes. You say, especially for those in flats, nowhere to charge it. Well, so there is that, but I would even say just where I am, there's like no infrastructure. If you've got an electric car around here, there's not many places to charge it. Not many places at all. There's home. So if you've got an electric car around here, if you wanted to make a long journey, it's you would have to plan it out in a way that maybe in some parts of the country it's more easy. But yeah, people in flat. So what you need there is you need the charge. Wherever it's possible to park a car, you need charging points. That's what you need. You're looking like round where I am. Sometimes car parks have some charging points, not very many. So yeah, the infrastructure in parts of the country, like where I am, North Midlands, it doesn't exist really. There isn't anything. But now, I mean, that's fine. If all you do, I mean, mostly all I do are short hops. It's just that every now and then, it's not very often, every now and then I will actually drive down to the south of England or something. I try and avoid it. But then I would have to really properly plan out exactly how I'm going to get my car charged. And often when I do drive, when I go on holiday, I tend to go on holiday to out of the way places. I don't like, to go somewhere quiet. And I don't go on holiday very often, but if I do, so those are places where there's nothing as well, even in the south of England. So yeah, the infrastructure obviously does need boosting up, and we should start to see that being rolled out over the next few years. But there we go. There's a VAT mismatch between charging at home and at a charging station, 20%. I didn't know that. But I mean, one of the points is that, with an electric car, not only is the overall cost lower, because you pay VAT on the electricity, right? But that's all you pay. Like on fuel, you pay VAT. There's VAT on fuel, but there's also fuel duty, which is much more. So when you're charging an electric car, you're only paying VAT. You're not paying any additional tax. But also because the overall cost, the cost of the electricity is way less than the cost of the petrol. So you're not even paying as much VAT. So fuel duty is a tax on its way out. And, the government really need to start. I mean, I suspect they're not going to just yet, but at some point, I suspect before the election, they're going to have to start having the conversation about fuel duty is a dead duck, and it's going to have to be replaced with something else, because you're not just going to do without billions of pounds a year. You say there's VAT on the fuel duty. No, I don't know. No, I don't think that's right. No, I don't think the VAT goes on top of the fuel duty. I'm almost certain that's not the case. But nonetheless, you have both. You have two taxes on fuel. And you only have one electricity. And because you don't use as much electricity, but there it is. Eventually all will charge in minutes. Yeah, so charging should get quicker. Absolutely, yes. It's like anything else. The technology will power up quite quickly. If you think about smartphones, if you think about when they first came online, and you think about, how they came on in 10 years, once more people are buying things, once the market increases for things, the technology will improve dramatically, because it's worth the more people are buying these products, the more money it is worth investing in research and development. So yes, I think we will see electric cars even over the next 10 years improving massively, because every technology that is a growing, is part of a growing market does. The Americans really gasp at the cost of our petrol diesel. Yes, I mean, I've been to America a long time ago now, but I mean, it was still the same then. But I mean, we don't produce it. We're not a producer. America is a producer of oil. And also, we have massive taxes on it. It's the same for food. But I'm told that food now in America is really expensive. can start by adding road pricing without removing fuel duty to encourage move away from ICE to EV. Ideally want to discourage car use altogether because congestion is awful in cities. Yeah, well, I mean, that's it. This is why I think if you had pay per mile as well, see, you do already pay per mile because it uses fuel and you're paying for the fuel and you're paying tax, you're paying VAT and fuel duty on it. But I don't think people are mindful of that. I think people just go, oh, fill petrol tank up, and then when it's down to like a quarter of a tank, you fill it up again, right? And I don't think people necessarily think of when they're just driving to the shops when they could bloody well walk. I don't think they think to themselves, oh, this is costing me money. Whereas with pay per mile, which ironically could cost less, it could actually end up costing you less per mile than it would have cost you using fuel or whatever. But it's also in your mind because you will have like a smart meter at home, and you'll have a readout of all the journeys you've taken. So you're then more mindful of the fact that taking your car is going to cost you, even if it doesn't cost you very much. So I think it will encourage people to not take the car when they don't need to. Ivan Ambrose 199 super chat, thank you, says the media don't give a damn about disabled people. No, I mean, even in this BBC article, and it does mention someone with PIP, but it doesn't really talk about, I mean, obviously we don't exactly know what's happening with that. I don't think anything's going to really happen with it tomorrow, I have to say. But in the future it is, and there's no mention of how that might be affected. It's just, oh, she gets like $5.50 a month PIP. No real emphasis on where there may be concerns about that. So even though they mention someone who has disabilities, they really don't get that. There is one person below them saying they're on benefits and they're freaking out over cuts. And she says here, I am fearful about the negative rhetoric in the media about disabled people in receipt of benefits. So rumours that PIP will be means tested. I mean, we don't know because not a lot has been mentioned. But then the fact that not a lot has been mentioned also suggests that Labour haven't really laid the groundwork for this either. I'm not sure there's going to be any change announced tomorrow, but we will see. I mean, we're like just over 24 hours away from finding out, I suppose, aren't we? Mike, they're saying mileage is noted on MOT. That is true. Yes, I suppose in theory you could do that. You could get billed after your MOT, I guess. But some cars are exempt from MOT. Ironically, if they're really old, would it maybe get people wanting to buy really old and therefore petrol consuming cars? But then, as the infrastructure, as more people buy, like what's going to happen with the transition? As more people buy electric cars, then you've got less need for petrol stations. Will they get fewer and far between? So there are all sorts of interesting things in the mix. But yeah, your MOT on your mileage on your MOT, you could potentially do that. The problem, I suppose, comes. You again, there's ways around this, of course, because you register. But it's like when you get rid of a car. So you'd have to make sure that it's going to be recorded, like if you sell a car or scrap a car or whatever, something like that. And make sure people aren't dodgy. Because you want to make sure you're in a situation where people don't think to themselves, oh, it's going to cost me too much. I'll just not get my car MOT'd. And then they risk getting caught on that. So you're going to have to, but yeah, maybe that could be a way to do it. That could be a good idea. But anyway, I've gone well over time. I didn't think we'd start talking about EVs. So there we go. Patrick said petrol pumps will become rarer. Yes, they'll inevitably become rarer. They'll have to. Graham, they're saying petrol station will become charge stations with the Greggs and Starbucks, etc. already happening. Not around here, but yes, I suppose I could see that. I don't mind the Greggs. I'll just ignore the Starbucks. But thanks very much for coming on anyway. We will find out tomorrow. So we're actually on Thursday, I'll probably discuss the budget. How about that? But have a great rest of day. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you later.